The morning sun broke across the horizon in slow majesty, washing the sprawling countryside estate in golden light. The mansion of the Harrington family stood proud on the hill, its marble pillars glistening like ivory spears and its iron gates standing firm as though keeping secrets from the world outside. This was not an ordinary house, but a fortress of legacy, filled with relics of battles fought and treasures won by ancestors long gone. Inside the grand ancestral hall, silence reigned except for the faint hiss of incense curling into the air. The hall itself was a cavern of history. Towering portraits of kings, queens, and warriors stared down from the walls. A stained glass dome scattered morning light into fractured rainbows that danced across the polished stone floor. At the far end stood the tapestry, ancient, tattered, yet commanding. It showed a glittering diamond the size of a human heart, burning like fire within the mouth of a jagged cave. Around it were etched warnings in forgotten runes. Only one shall return. Before this tapestry stood Lord Harrington and Lady Harrington, the parents of the three sisters. Their faces were grave, shadowed with knowledge too dark to speak plainly. They had seen families destroyed by the quest for this diamond. Yet, tradition demanded that their daughters take the trial. The cave would call for one generation every century, and refusal brought curses upon the bloodline. The sisters stood in a row. Evelyn, the eldest, tall and poised, her braided black hair tied neatly back. Her dark green explorer's outfit clung to her athletic frame, and her hazel eyes carried a commanding sharpness. She looked like a leader, but her thoughts already burned with strategy, how to outwit the other two when the moment came. Isabella, the second-born, stood slightly behind, medium in height but striking in presence. Her curly black hair framed her face like a crown, and her red leather jacket caught the glow of the stained glass, making her appear fiery, unpredictable. She held a quiet intelligence, but beneath it, a simmering envy. Camilla, the youngest, shorter yet graceful, with long straight black hair that flowed over her gray outfit. She looked innocent, even fragile, but her eyes betrayed her. A cold determination brewed there, sharper than steel. Their parents spoke of unity, of sisterhood, of the need to trust one another against the dangers of the cave. But even as the words were spoken, the sisters' hands tightened at their sides, not in solidarity, but in hidden rivalry. Each of them was already imagining herself as the sole victor, the one to return alive with the diamond, her name carved in legend. The oath was sworn, their hands pressed over their hearts as the ancient vow was spoken aloud. The air grew heavy, almost as if the diamond itself had heard their promise. The cave waited. Outside, the sunlight blazed brighter, but inside the hall, the shadows seemed to grow. The journey had begun. The sisters left the mansion behind as the heavy iron gates groaned open. A carriage had taken them as far as the outskirts, but from there, no road existed. Only a narrow dirt path that cut like a scar through the wilderness. The morning sun was high now, painting the sky with sharp light and scattering silver across the dew-drenched grass. Birds shrieked in flocks above the treetops, as though warning of what lay ahead. The jungle loomed before them like a wall, vast, green, and untamed. Massive trees with twisting roots clawed at the earth, their canopies interwoven so tightly that daylight barely pierced through. A mist clung to the ground, and the air was damp with the scent of moss, wet stone, and something metallic, like rust or blood. The sisters stopped at the edge. For a brief moment, they stood shoulder to shoulder, pretending to be allies, but their minds raced with hidden thoughts. Evelyn stepped forward first. Her boots sank slightly into the mud, and she drew a deep breath, her sharp hazel eyes scanning every shadow. She moved with the confidence of a soldier, but her hand rested firmly on the hilt of the dagger strapped to her thigh, as though expecting betrayal at any second. Isabella followed closely, her red jacket gleaming defiantly against the green gloom. She carried herself with fire in her stride, pushing through vines and ferns with impatient force. Her lips curled into a faint smirk. Her mind was already mapping strategies, not against the jungle's dangers, but against her sisters. Camilla lingered at the back, her delicate figure cloaked in deceptive calm. Her dark hair spilled over her gray outfit as she adjusted a small satchel across her shoulder. Inside, she carried more than survival tools, hidden poisons, ropes, and sharp tricks that revealed her calculated mind. Though she looked fragile, her silence was dangerous. As they stepped deeper, the jungle swallowed them. The air grew thicker, the sounds louder, howls of unseen beasts, the hiss of snakes sliding across damp rocks, the creak of branches shifting as if alive. Sunlight fractured into narrow beams that pierced the canopy, illuminating the sisters like stage lights in a theater of danger. Suddenly, a loud crack echoed through the trees. The sisters froze. A massive shadow moved between the trunks, its heavy breathing reverberating through the mist. Though they could not see it clearly, the shape suggested something ancient, something that had been watching intruders for centuries. Evelyn raised her dagger, Isabella clenched her fists, and Camilla's lips twitched into the faintest of smiles. The jungle was already testing them. What none of them said aloud was the thought echoing in their hearts. Only one of us will leave this place alive. The vines closed behind them like a gate. The path to return was gone. Forward was the only choice. The jungle had accepted its prey. The jungle seemed endless. Hours of trudging through tangled vines and swampy ground had left their boots caked in mud and their clothes clinging to their skin with sweat. The sunlight, once brilliant, was now a filtered glow that barely touched the forest floor, swallowed by the thick canopy above. The air buzzed with the cries of strange insects and the distant roar of predators unseen. Evelyn led with sharp precision, her dagger constantly sweeping aside vines and branches. She moved like a hunter, determined and alert. Isabella stayed close, her temper rising with every step. She hated following anyone, especially Evelyn. Camilla, as always, lingered behind, her quiet eyes scanning the ground, the branches, and her sister's movements. They reached a clearing where the jungle opened to reveal a moss-covered stone wall, ancient, cracked, and half-swallowed by nature. Strange markings, etched deep into its surface, glowed faintly under the filtered light. The sight drew them all to a halt. "Treasure markers," Isabella muttered, her eyes narrowing as she brushed her hand across the carvings. But inside, her thoughts burned hotter. "If we're close, I'll make sure it's me who carries that diamond back." Camilla's gaze lingered on the carvings too, but not for their meaning. Her sharp mind studied the symbols carefully, committing them to memory, while her lips curved faintly. She wasn't thinking about treasure. She was thinking about opportunity, about what might happen if the sisters began to turn on each other here. It happened faster than expected. A rustling broke the silence. A cluster of serpents slithered from the roots, their scales glistening, tongues flickering. Evelyn reacted instantly, cutting two down with a single slash. Isabella burned with frustration, hating how Evelyn always seemed one step ahead. "Stay behind me," Evelyn commanded. "Don't you dare give me orders," Isabella snapped, her voice sharp as steel. The serpents lunged again, and this time Isabella shoved past Evelyn, striking one with a sharpened branch she had snatched from the ground. The fight was brief but fierce, the sisters moving with coordinated instinct, yet every strike carried the weight of rivalry. By the time the last serpent lay still, the clearing was filled with heavy breaths and sharper glares. Camilla stood untouched at the back, her weapon never drawn. Her sisters noticed. Evelyn's eyes narrowed. Isabella smirked cruelly. "You let us fight while you watched," Evelyn accused. Camilla's tone was calm, measured, almost soothing, "and you handled it. Why waste energy when I know you'll always compete to prove yourselves?" Her words were a dagger without a blade, and both sisters felt its cut. The air between them thickened. The jungle around them fell silent, as though even the beasts sensed the shift. What began as survival was curdling into rivalry. The ancient stone wall loomed behind them, glowing faintly, as if marking the beginning of something darker. Somewhere deep within, the jungle whispered a cruel truth. Betrayal had already taken root. The jungle thickened again after the serpent clearing, pressing in like a living wall. The sisters marched in silence, Their breathing heavy, weapons ready, yet their thoughts louder than any sound around them. No one trusted the other now. Every step felt like a chess move. The sunlight broke through in piercing shafts as they reached a rocky incline. Before them, the ground dipped into a cavernous sinkhole, jagged with twisted roots and slick stones. The air was cooler here, damp with the scent of moss and hidden water. They descended slowly, their boots crunching against broken earth. At the bottom, the path forked. One way curved left into a tunnel lit faintly by sunlight seeping through cracks. The other sloped right into shadow, a darker passage swallowed by mist and the eerie cries of unseen creatures. Evelyn crouched, scanning the ground for signs. She traced claw marks carved into stone, her jaw tightening. "Something hunts here," she muttered. Isabella crossed her arms, fire burning in her eyes. Or maybe something guards the treasure. Camilla stood in the middle, silent, calculating. Her eyes flicked from left to right, then back to her sisters. She knew what neither wanted to admit. The cave system was designed to divide them. Whoever created it had ensured that greed, fear, and suspicion would do the rest. A silence stretched long enough to feel unbearable. Finally, Isabella broke it. "I'll take the left. Brighter, faster." "Of course you would." Evelyn shot back, charging in without thought. "I'll take the right. Shadow hides more than sunlight ever will." Camilla didn't argue. She simply nodded, stepping back as though allowing her sisters to decide their own fate. But inside, her plan was forming. If they split, their trust would fracture further. She didn't need to kill them with a blade. The cave would do it for her. The sisters exchanged sharp glares before finally agreeing. They would split. Evelyn into shadow, Isabella into light, and Camilla trailing behind whichever path offered her the greater advantage. As they moved apart, the cavern itself seemed to groan, the walls echoing with their footsteps. The jungle above grew quiet, as though watching. In that moment, three destinies separated, three hearts already poisoned by ambition. And the cave, ancient and cruel, welcomed them with open jaws. The betrayal hadn't yet drawn blood, but it was there, sharpening its teeth. The cave swallowed them whole, each step echoing with suspicion. Evelyn's boots splashed into shallow water as she moved into the right tunnel, cloaked in shadow. The walls pressed tight, wet with condensation, streaked with claw marks that seemed too deliberate, almost as if carved to remind intruders they were prey. Her torchlight barely cut through the fog, and every sound magnified. The drip of water, the rustle of unseen creatures, her own heart hammering. She held her dagger close, teeth clenched, muttering to herself, "Better alone than stabbed in the back." Isabella strode through the left tunnel, where sunlight fractured into sharp beams through cracks above. The air was warmer here, alive with the hum of insects. She walked with a confidence that felt forced, each step louder than necessary, as if daring the shadows to challenge her. Her hand rested on the hilt of her curved blade, her lips curled in a smile that hid fear. But behind her bravado was calculation. Camilla will wait. Evelyn will stumble. The diamond will be mine. Camilla lingered behind, neither fully committing to the light nor the dark. She stood at the fork for several long minutes, watching the dust settle where her sisters had gone. Her face was unreadable, calm as stone, but her eyes glittered with strategy. She knew both sisters too well, their tempers, their impatience. She turned toward Evelyn's path of shadow, steps slow, deliberate, as if stalking her prey. The tunnels twisted deeper. Evelyn's path narrowed, forcing her to crawl under a jagged arch of stone. As she slid forward, her torch flickered and died, leaving her in suffocating darkness. A sudden screech echoed from above. A swarm of blind cave bats exploded from the ceiling, wings slapping her face. She gasped, swinging her dagger wildly, her breath ragged as she pressed herself to the wall. They passed quickly, but her nerves shook, leaving her pulse unsteady. Isabella, meanwhile, found herself climbing a steep rock ledge, her muscles burning as she pulled herself upward. The shaft of sunlight ahead promised an opening, but as she reached the ledge, the ground crumbled beneath her boot. She fell hard, clutching at the edge, dangling above sharp stalagmites. Her blade clattered down into the abyss below. She gritted her teeth, pulling herself up by sheer force of will, cursing under her breath. Her pride bled more than her scraped arms. And Camilla, silent, methodical Camilla, followed Evelyn, her soft steps masked by the dripping echoes of the cave. She stopped often, listening, calculating. A pebble rolled under her boot, and she froze, knowing Evelyn would hear. In the silence that followed, Camilla smirked. Let her think it's the cave hunting her. Evelyn spun around, dagger raised, whispering to herself, I know you're there. But the tunnel gave her nothing back, only shadows and silence. Somewhere in the distance, the cave rumbled. A low, guttural sound, like something ancient stirring in its sleep. The paths of light and dark were not merely challenges. They were trials, tests to prove not only strength, but loyalty. And the sisters, poisoned by ambition, were already failing. The tunnels converged again, sunlight bleeding faintly through a jagged opening above. Evelyn emerged first, dagger still drawn, her hair damp and tangled from the bat's assault. Her breaths were shallow, but her eyes burned with defiance. From the opposite side, Isabella climbed into the same chamber, panting, her jacket torn at the sleeve where the rock had nearly claimed her. She tried to hide her trembling arms behind a sly grin, as if she had conquered the trial with ease. But her empty sheath betrayed her. Her blade was gone. For a long moment, the two sisters stood in silence, the cavern filled only with the hiss of dripping water. Their gazes locked, not as companions, but as predators circling prey. Evelyn tightened her grip on her dagger. Isabella smirked, but her hand twitched toward a sharp stone half hidden by her boot. Camilla entered last, moving with quiet precision, her footsteps swallowed by the echoes. She scanned her sisters, noting the sweat on Evelyn's brow, the cut on Isabella's arm. Her lips curved into the faintest smile. The cave had already weakened them. It would not take much to tip them further. Looks like you lost something, Evelyn said coldly, flicking her eyes to Isabella's missing blade. Looks like you lost your nerve, Isabella replied, her voice smooth, mocking, screaming at bats like a child. The words stung, but Evelyn forced herself not to react. Instead, she stepped forward slowly, dagger glinting in the fractured light. Isabella bent slightly, her fingers brushing the stone at her feet. Camilla raised her hand, palm open, stepping between them. She spoke calmly, her tone edged with authority. The diamond is ahead. Only a fool would bleed out before the prize is in sight. But her words were not meant to reconcile. They were meant to plant seeds. She wanted them to mistrust each other more, to lash out, to weaken one another before she struck at the right time. Evelyn's eyes narrowed. Isabella's smile faltered. The cave rumbled again, dust trickling from the ceiling, a reminder that it could collapse at any moment. And still, they lingered, caught in the trap of suspicion. Suddenly, Evelyn lunged forward, not at Isabella, but at a thin rope of vines clinging to the cavern wall. She sliced them free with her dagger, and a cascade of rocks tumbled down. Isabella leapt back, barely dodging as the stones crashed where she had been standing. Her smirk vanished, replaced with raw fury. You tried to kill me, Isabella shouted, grabbing the sharp stone and holding it like a weapon. You were in my way, Evelyn hissed. Camilla did not intervene. She only watched, her eyes gleaming, storing every reaction, every weakness. She could use this later. The chamber felt smaller now, suffocating with rage and fear. The sisters were no longer a team. They were three blades aimed at each other's throats, waiting for the first one to slip. The sisters pushed deeper into the cave, silence stretching between them like a blade's edge. No words, only the sound of boots scuffing stone and the low hum of dripping water. The tunnel widened until they stepped into a massive chamber, its walls glistening as though carved from mirrors of crystal. At first, it seemed beautiful, shafts of daylight fractured through the jagged ceiling, scattering into 1,000 reflections across the glittering stone. The chamber sparkled like a palace, every surface shimmering with light. But then the reflections shifted, bending unnaturally. The sisters stared and saw not their true images, but distorted versions. Evelyn saw herself in the crystal walls, taller, cloaked in black, her dagger dripping with blood. The reflection's lips curled into a smile she had not made. Isabella's reflection laughed at her. Not the sly grin she wore, but a wild, feral cackle, its teeth sharp, its hands gripping not a stone but a blade of fire. Camilla's reflection looked calm at first, but then it stepped forward on its own, eyes glowing faintly, lips moving in silent words she could not hear. The chamber pulsed like a living thing. Shadows stretched where no light should have reached. Their breaths grew shallow, the air heavy with whispers. The cave was not showing them what was real. It was showing them what they feared each other would become. "Do you see that?" Isabella asked, voice trembling despite her effort to stay composed. Evelyn gritted her teeth. "It's a trick. Don't let it get to you." Yet her knuckles whitened on her dagger's handle. Camilla remained silent, watching carefully. The illusions were dangerous, yes, but also useful. If they could drive her sisters into paranoia, she wouldn't need to lift a finger to break them. The floor trembled slightly, and a chasm cracked open down the center of the chamber. From the dark gap rose a mist that carried shifting faces, their parents, their enemies, and worst of all, themselves. Isabella stepped too close to the edge, her eyes locked on an image of herself wearing a crown of diamonds. Evelyn darted forward, grabbing her arm, pulling her back before the ground crumbled. Isabella shoved her away, glaring. "Don't touch me," Isabella hissed. "I just saved your life," Evelyn snapped back. "Or you were trying to throw me in," Isabella growled, tightening her grip on the stone she held. The crystal walls reflected every word, multiplying them until the chamber roared with echoes of "throw me in, throw me in." Camilla moved closer to the edge, her eyes never leaving the glowing mist. She whispered under her breath, words her sisters could not hear. Her reflection mouthed the same words in perfect unison, as though the cave itself obeyed her thoughts. For a brief, chilling moment, the illusions shifted again, not of themselves, but of their fates. One sister walking out of the jungle, clutching the diamond. Two others lying broken, left behind in the darkness. The cave was showing the truth. Only one would survive. The sisters' hearts pounded faster, their mistrust hardening into resolve. This chamber was no longer just an illusion. It was a prophecy. The air shifted as the sisters pressed deeper beyond the chamber of illusions. The walls narrowed into a sloping tunnel, slick with moss and glistening moisture. The faint trickle of running water echoed ahead, promising relief from the suffocating air, but the cave never offered gifts without cruelty. The tunnel widened into a cavern where a subterranean river cut across their path, black and restless. Shafts of sunlight pierced through thin cracks above, scattering into silver beams across the water's surface. It should have looked beautiful, but there was something wrong. The river smelled faintly of iron and rot. The mist that hung above it stung the nose, making every breath sharp. Fish floated belly up in the current, their scales glimmering like shards of broken glass. Evelyn crouched by the edge, dipping the tip of her dagger into the water. When she pulled it out, the blade hissed faintly, its sheen dulled where the liquid touched it. She frowned. Poison. Even the river wants us dead. Isabella knelt farther downstream, staring at the remains of a half-decayed animal tangled in the rocks. Her lips curled into a smirk. Or maybe it's a test. Maybe the one clever enough to cross is the one worthy of the diamond. Camilla scanned the cavern, her sharp eyes noting a narrow ledge of rocks that stretched across the river like stepping stones, slick, uneven, but passable. "There," she said softly, pointing. "It's the only way across." The stones gleamed wet under the fractured light, their surfaces slimy with moss. One misstep and the water would claim them. Evelyn stepped forward first, balancing carefully on the jagged path. Her body was taut, every muscle controlled, her braids swinging lightly as she moved. Isabella followed close behind, slower, her eyes darting not only at the river but at her sister's back. Camilla came last, steady, her silence betraying no fear. The current roared louder, and the mist thickened. Each breath burned their lungs. Sweat beaded on their skin, not from heat, but from the poison in the air. Halfway across, Evelyn slipped. Her foot skidded, and she dropped to one knee. Isabella reached for her, but her hand hesitated just above Evelyn's shoulder. Help her, or let her fall. The hesitation was long enough for Evelyn to push herself upright, glaring back with narrowed eyes. She knew. She had seen it. You hesitated, Evelyn hissed. Isabella's lips twisted into a cold smile. Maybe I was deciding if you deserved saving. The words cut deeper than the poisoned air. Evelyn moved on, fury tightening her grip on her dagger. Behind them, Camilla tread carefully, her mind racing. Both sisters were blinded by anger. Both were distracted. She could use that. She could survive this. Then the stones shifted. The current surged, crashing violently against their narrow path. Isabella slipped this time, her arms flailing. She caught herself on the edge of a rock, dangling above the black water, her boots inches from the poisoned surface. Evelyn, she screamed, panic breaking through her arrogance. Evelyn froze, watching her. One pull could save Isabella. One push could end her. Camilla's eyes sharpened. This was the moment. The cavern trembled again, water splashing higher as if the cave itself demanded sacrifice. Only one of them would leave. The question was who would strike first. The poisoned river was finally behind them. The sisters stood at the far bank, breathing heavily, their lungs still raw from the toxic mist. The air here was colder, denser, and the cave widened into a vast hollow chamber where the light of the outside world could no longer reach. Their lanterns and torches cast wild, dancing flames across the jagged walls, throwing monstrous shadows that seemed to whisper with life. Each shadow grew longer, sharper, stretching over the stone floor like twisted specters of the women who carried them. It was here, in this darkness, that their patience shattered. Evelyn walked ahead, her dagger drawn, each step calculated. Her body was rigid with the fury she held from Isabella's hesitation earlier. Her braids swung like a whip behind her, her breath deep and angry. Isabella trailed a few steps back, still shaken from nearly falling into the poisoned river. But her pride wouldn't allow her to show weakness. Her curly black hair stuck to her damp face as her eyes glittered dangerously in the torchlight. She clenched her short sword, whispering to herself, "If she won't protect me, then I'll make sure she doesn't leave with the diamond." Camilla lingered at the rear, quieter than the others. She seemed calm, but her silence was not surrender, it was calculation. Every twitch of her sister's hands, every tightening of their jaws, every glance at the treasure map Evelyn now carried in her satchel, she observed it all. The cave seemed to sense the rising tension. Their flickering torches made the shadows writhe across the walls like a theater of war. The sound of dripping water echoed like the tick of a clock counting down to bloodshed. It began when Evelyn turned suddenly. "You wanted me to fall," she spat, voice sharp as a blade. Isabella smirked, though her grip on her sword betrayed unease. "And you wanted me to drown. Don't pretend your hesitation was different from mine." Their eyes locked, years of jealousy and rivalry sparking like flint striking steel. Camilla stepped forward, raising her voice for the first time. "Enough. The treasure is close. Fight here, and none of us will make it out." But her words fell like stones into a roaring sea. Evelyn lunged first. Steel clashed against steel as her dagger met Isabella's sword. Sparks scattered in the gloom. The shadows leapt with them, making the cavern look alive with demons fighting for dominance. Evelyn's strikes were precise, her movements honed, but Isabella countered with reckless ferocity, driven by pride and desperation. Their boots scraped against the rock as they spun, dodged, and struck. Every clang of their weapons echoed like thunder inside the cave. Camilla stood back, her hand hovering over her own blade, watching, waiting. When Evelyn shoved Isabella against the wall, her dagger at her throat, Isabella gasped but didn't yield. "Do it," she hissed. "Kill me. Then Camilla will slit your back open the moment you turn." The words were venom. Evelyn's eyes flicked instinctively toward Camilla, and that was enough. Isabella shoved her off, swinging her sword with renewed fury. Camilla's lips curled into a ghost of a smile. Her sisters were destroying each other, and all she had to do was endure. The cavern roared with their battle, dust shaking loose from the ceiling, stones cracking under their weight. Shadows spun madly, swallowing them whole, until the sisters were nothing but dark shapes tearing each other apart. This was no longer about the diamond. It was about survival, and only one would leave. The clash of steel against steel rang through the cavern, echoing like thunder trapped underground. Evelyn and Isabella circled one another, blades glinting in the firelight, their breaths ragged and angry. Camilla's silence still hung heavy, but the cave was no longer silent. The ground trembled. At first, it was faint, a small shiver beneath their boots. Then, the tremor grew, and rocks cascaded from above. A low, guttural roar rumbled through the chamber, as if the cave itself had grown weary of their hatred. Suddenly, flames burst to life along the far wall. A hidden vent in the stone exhaled fire like a dragon's breath, sweeping across the cavern with a deafening whoosh. The heat was blistering, a wave so strong it forced the sisters apart. Their blades lowered instinctively as survival became more urgent than their feud. Before them stretched a hellish chamber, jagged ridges, molten cracks glowing like veins of fire, and narrow stepping stones across an abyss that boiled with heat. The air shimmered, every breath scorching their lungs. This was no ordinary cavern. It was a death trap, designed to test not only their strength, but their endurance. Evelyn wiped sweat from her brow, her face glistening in the flickering firelight. The heat only sharpened her fury. "We'll burn alive if we hesitate," she barked, though her eyes never left Isabella. Isabella's curls clung wet against her face as she raised her sword again. The flames reflected in her dark eyes, making her look wild, untamed, dangerous. "Then move," she growled. "But don't think I'll save you if you fall." Camilla stepped forward, finally unsheathing her blade, her expression calm but unreadable. Her pale skin glowed orange under the firelight, her eyes sharp and deliberate. "The cave doesn't care for our rivalry," she said quietly. "It wants blood. If it doesn't get one of us, it will take all three." Her words hung like smoke. Ahead, the stepping stones stretched across the fiery abyss, some barely wide enough for a foot. Lava bubbled far below, belching toxic fumes. Above, the ceiling groaned, dripping molten drops that sizzled when they hit the stone floor. One wrong move, one slip, and the flames would devour them whole. They had no choice but to move forward. Evelyn leapt first, her movements sharp, determined, as if daring the fire to consume her. Isabella followed, her boots slipping slightly before she caught balance, her jaw clenched in anger. Camilla was last, graceful and steady, her eyes darting between her sisters. But betrayal lingered in the air like smoke. Each leap across the stones was another opportunity, a shove, a slip, a chance to eliminate a rival without ever raising a blade. Halfway across, a sudden roar of fire shot up between two stones, forcing Isabella to lunge back, nearly into Evelyn's path. Evelyn grabbed her instinctively, but instead of pulling her up fully, she hesitated. The thought was there, burning brighter than the flames around them. Let her go. Isabella's eyes widened, realization flashing across her face. "You'd kill me here?" she hissed. The hesitation cost them both. Another eruption of fire burst between them, separating the sisters onto different stones, the heat scorching their skin. Camilla, still behind, watched carefully, her mind weaving its web. Each fire burst, each stumble, each moment of weakness, she memorized it. She was already imagining the moment she would strike, already planning how she would make sure only her boots touched the exit on the far side. The chamber howled with fire, shadows writhing against the walls. The sisters pressed on, each step not just a fight against the flames, but against each other's intent. By the time they reached the far edge, they were drenched in sweat, their hair singed, their blades slick in their hands. The cave had not killed them, but it had forced them to show their truest selves. And it was clear, only one would leave this place alive. The sisters stumbled out of the chamber of fire, coughing, their clothes damp with sweat and singed at the edges. The air cooled suddenly, the suffocating heat giving way to a chilling breeze that whispered through a cavern ahead. This chamber was unlike the others. It was vast and unnervingly silent. The walls, instead of jagged rock, were smooth and polished, almost like glass. Streams of faint blue light pulsed within them, creating the eerie sensation that the cavern was alive. And then they saw it. A colossal mirror stretching across the far wall, taller than any cathedral window, flawless and gleaming. But it did not reflect them as they were. The reflections were twisted. Evelyn saw herself not as the strong, commanding eldest sister, but as a tyrant, her braid undone, her face twisted with greed, clutching the diamond like a warlord holding a kingdom hostage. She froze, breath catching in her throat. Isabella saw herself as a shadow, ignored, unseen, her face blurred, her voice unheard. She was the forgotten sister, the one left behind, consumed by resentment. She gritted her teeth, the vision like a dagger stabbing into old wounds. Camilla, however, saw something else. Her reflection stood taller, prouder, her straight hair shimmering like a queen's crown. She held no sword, no diamond, only a cruel smile, as if she had already won, as if she had manipulated them all into destroying one another. The cave whispered. Its voice was not sound, but thought, pressing into their minds, feeding the truths they tried to bury. You are not sisters, you are rivals. You are not family, you are enemies. Only one of you deserves the diamond. Only one of you deserves to live. Evelyn raised her blade instinctively, pointing it at the mirror, at her own reflection. The polished glass rippled like water under the edge, but instead of breaking, her reflection stepped forward, peeling away from the surface like a living shadow. The others gasped as their reflections did the same. 3 shadow versions of the sisters emerged, their eyes glowing faintly, their movements sharp and deliberate. They were not mindless phantoms. They were perfect distortions, carrying all the cruelty, resentment, and ambition each sister denied. The chamber became a battleground of self. Evelyn fought her own wrath, her double striking with vicious fury. Isabella battled her phantom, which moved with the silence and bitterness of the forgotten, vanishing and reappearing to strike from behind. Camilla's reflections circled her like a predator, smirking, calculating, never attacking until the exact moment weakness showed. The clash was unlike anything before. Every strike was not just against an enemy, but against themselves, their worst selves. And yet, the mirror twisted deeper. For as they fought, their reflections sometimes changed faces. Evelyn's phantom lunged at Isabella. Isabella's ghostly double struck at Camilla. The illusions blurred, forcing them to wonder, am I striking my reflection or my sister? Sweat poured, steel rang. The chamber glowed with the eerie pulse of blue light. Cries of anger, of fear, of exhaustion echoed against the mirrored walls. Minutes stretched like hours. Slowly, one by one, the phantoms fell, dissolving into smoke that was reabsorbed by the mirror. But when the final phantom collapsed, the mirror pulsed once more. A final reflection stared back at them. A single figure, not 3. It was one of them, but which? The figure was cloaked in light, face indistinguishable, yet it held the diamond in one hand and a bloody blade in the other. The message was clear. The cave was showing the future. Only one sister would leave alive, and she would not come back unchanged. The chamber fell silent again, the whispering gone, but its poison lingered. Doubt had taken root. Their fight was no longer about survival. It was about destiny. And in their eyes, the betrayal sharpened into certainty. The mirror chamber did not release them gently. No sooner had the final phantom vanished into mist than the ground quaked beneath their boots. The once flawless mirrored walls splintered like glass struck by a hammer, lines of fracture spiderwebbing across the surface with an echoing crack. The low hum of the cave became a roar, deep and unrelenting, as though the mountain itself was alive and angry. Dust rained from the ceiling. Stalactites snapped, crashing down like spears. The floor rippled, uneven, forcing the sisters to stumble and brace themselves against the trembling stone. "Move!" Evelyn shouted, though her voice cracked with more desperation than command. She sprinted toward a tunnel revealed in the collapsing wall, her blade still clutched tightly. Isabella and Camilla followed, but not without glancing at each other. their eyes dark with the silent question. Do I let her fall? Do I let her die now? The tunnel narrowed sharply, its floor tilting downward. Rocks broke loose behind them, tumbling like thunder. At times they had to leap across gaps as the ground split open, the abyss beneath glowing faintly with molten light. The cave had turned into a predator. It did not test them anymore. It wanted to devour them. Halfway through the passage, a massive section of the ceiling collapsed, sealing the path behind them. They were trapped in a new chamber, one even more treacherous. This one was circular, with a floor riddled by deep cracks that radiated outward like a shattered plate. Through the cracks burned molten orange light, heat rising in suffocating waves. Every step was a risk. One wrong move, and the stone beneath their feet would crumble, dropping them into fire. Evelyn, breathing hard, wiped the dust and sweat from her face. We need to move carefully. Follow me. But Isabella's patience finally shattered. Follow you? Look where your leadership has brought us, she snapped, her voice echoing across the fiery cavern. Evelyn spun, eyes blazing, but before she could speak, Camilla's voice cut through like a blade. Both of you are fools. This cave isn't trying to test us anymore. It's trying to kill us all. Only one of us makes it out alive, and it will not be you. The tension ignited faster than the lava below. Evelyn lunged, her dagger flashing. Isabella dodged, the blade grazing her arm, and shoved Evelyn backward. The eldest stumbled, her heel skidding dangerously close to one of the glowing cracks. She steadied herself at the last moment, but her expression twisted into pure fury. Camilla seized the chaos. With startling speed, she grabbed a broken stalactite from the ground and hurled it at Isabella. Isabella barely rolled aside, the stone slamming into the floor where she had stood. The ground cracked further, a new fissure glowing beneath their feet. The chamber became a war zone of treachery. The sisters fought not just with steel but with the cave itself, shoving, dodging, and trying to maneuver each other toward the molten fissures. Every shove echoed betrayal. Every strike carried years of envy, resentment, and ambition. Minutes passed like hours. Sweat drenched them, their breath sharp, their bodies trembling from exhaustion. Yet no one yielded. And then, with a thunderous crack, a massive section of the floor gave way. The ground collapsed in a jagged circle, forcing the sisters to leap onto the remaining stable platforms, now separated from each other by streams of molten fire. They were no longer inches apart, blades clashing. They stood across from one another on trembling islands of stone, separated by fire, glaring as the chamber rumbled violently around them. The cave had made its choice. It would burn away everything but one. And in their hearts, each sister silently vowed the same thing: it will be me. The chamber did not end with fire. As the molten floor groaned and threatened to swallow them, a fissure opened along one side, releasing a torrent of choking gray smoke. The cave howled as if it were alive, sucking the sisters into a narrow, spiraling corridor where light and shadow twisted endlessly. The smoke grew thicker with each step. It stung their eyes, clung to their throats, and turned the air into poison. But worse than the suffocation was the way it moved. It did not drift naturally. It coiled into shapes, faces, hands, shadows, mimicking their parents, their younger selves, even their rivals. Each swirl whispered words they wanted to hear, and words they dreaded. Evelyn coughed, blade in hand, her voice hoarse. "Stay close." But Isabella cut her off. "No, every time we follow you, we get closer to death." She pushed through the haze, refusing to let Evelyn lead. Camilla, quiet and calculating, trailed behind, her mind working in silence. She didn't need to speak. The smoke spoke for her, conjuring phantom voices that slithered into her sister's ears. "Evelyn thinks you're weak," it hissed to Isabella. "Isabella wants you gone," it hissed to Evelyn. "She will betray you when you turn your back," it whispered to both. The cave did not want them to fight with steel anymore. It wanted them to kill each other with paranoia. The corridor widened into a labyrinth of stone walls, all shrouded in the crawling fog. Every path looked the same, jagged rock swallowed in smoke, the ground uneven and slick. Their shadows warped grotesquely in the dim light, growing long and monstrous. Minutes dragged on. Tension sharpened with every step. The sisters no longer saw clearly. They saw only silhouettes. They heard footsteps, but couldn't always tell if they belonged to their sisters or the cave's illusions. At one turn, Isabella spun suddenly, slashing at a shadow that resembled Evelyn. Her blade missed. The figure dissolved into smoke. Evelyn, real and alive, stood 2 paces behind her, eyes blazing with fury at the attack. "You meant that strike," Evelyn spat. "You don't know what's real." Isabella snapped, but the excuse rang hollow in the thick air. Camilla stayed back, lips curling into a thin smile. She let the cave whisper, let suspicion corrode them. She needed only patience. Hours seemed to pass, though it was minutes. The labyrinth shifted subtly, walls grinding, openings closing, new ones forming. The sisters were no longer sure if they moved forward or in circles. The smoke thickened again, so thick that Evelyn and Isabella lost sight of each other. Their voices echoed, distorted, as if multiplied. "Evelyn," Isabella called. Her tone betrayed a sliver of fear. A shadow answered her, Evelyn's outline stepping forward. But the figure's eyes glowed faintly red. Isabella swung her dagger, only for her blade to pass through smoke. Real Evelyn appeared behind her, eyes narrowed, voice low with suspicion. "You keep trying to strike me. I thought," Isabella began, but her words faltered. Camilla seized the moment. From the mist, she lunged, ramming Isabella's shoulder with sudden force. Isabella staggered into the fog, screaming as her footing gave way on a crumbling ledge that had appeared out of nowhere. The smoke thinned at last, as though the cave itself decided they had struggled long enough. The labyrinth's walls stretched outward, and the floor flattened into a cavern so vast it seemed to breathe. Torches lit by no hand lined the chamber, flames burning a pale blue instead of orange. The air was colder here, sharp enough to sting the lungs. In the center of the cavern sat an altar carved from obsidian, polished smooth as glass, and atop it lay the object that had pulled them into this nightmare, the diamond. It was not just any jewel. It was massive, flawless, and so radiant that the torchlight bent toward it, as though it were the source of all light within the chamber. The sisters had risked everything for this. They had bled, fought, and betrayed each other for its brilliance. But something else filled the room. Shadows pressed along the ceiling like restless waves. They murmured faintly, not in words, but in tones of hunger. Evelyn and Camilla, now the only 2 left standing, or so it seemed, paused at the edge of the chamber. Evelyn's chest heaved with exhaustion, blade clutched tight. Sweat streaked her face, her braided hair damp and heavy. But her eyes locked fiercely on the diamond. She would not leave without it. Camilla, shorter, calmer, always watching with quiet calculation, stood at her side. Her straight black hair clung to her cheeks, her gray outfit smeared with soot. Unlike Evelyn, her breathing was steady, her mind already working on the next step. They both knew what the other was thinking. Only one of them could leave with the treasure. The cave itself confirmed it. A grinding sound shook the floor, and the altar split slightly, revealing jagged stone teeth beneath it. An ancient voice rolled out, not from a mouth, but from the walls. "One must remain. One must bleed. The treasure demands sacrifice." The words echoed again and again, until they became indistinguishable from the rumbling of the stone. Neither sister moved at first. Their eyes flicked from the jewel to each other. Years of rivalry, jealousy, and buried resentment now had form. Evelyn stepped forward first, her boots striking the stone hard. "If it's blood the cave wants, I'll give it yours." Camilla smirked faintly, as if she'd been waiting for that. "I've been planning for this moment since we entered. You think I didn't know it would come down to this?" Her hand slid behind her cloak, not for a blade, but for a shard of jagged obsidian she had hidden along the way. She had kept it close, saving it for when her sister's guard was lowest. But Evelyn was not blind to her cunning. She lunged before Camilla could strike, steel flashing. Their blades, steel and stone, clashed with a sharp crack, sparks bursting. The fight was not frantic like their earlier battles. It was cold, deliberate, filled with calculation. Every step echoed, every swing meant to kill. Evelyn struck with strength, wide arcs meant to overpower. Camilla slipped aside, letting her sister's rage fuel her missteps, waiting for the perfect chance to sink the obsidian into flesh. The cave watched. The shadows on the ceiling writhed eagerly, whispering louder, feeding the fire of their hatred. The diamond glowed brighter, as if it thrived on their struggle. Minutes stretched endlessly. The air was thick with tension, the altar looming like a throne of judgment. And then it happened. Evelyn's blade cut through Camilla's sleeve, drawing a thin line of blood across her arm. The cave roared, the shadows shrieking in satisfaction. Camilla staggered, but instead of faltering, she used her sister's momentum. With a swift, calculated motion, she thrust her shard upward into Evelyn's shoulder. Evelyn gasped, dropping to one knee, her weapon clattering against the stone. Blood poured down her arm, but her eyes still burned with fury. She reached toward the altar as if sheer will could pull the diamond to her. Camilla kicked her hand aside, stepping onto the obsidian platform. She placed her bloodied shard against the altar. The diamond pulsed once, absorbing the crimson stains. The voice of the cave boomed again, echoing with cruel finality. One remains. One departs. The sacrifice is fulfilled. The shadows scattered. The air grew still. Evelyn collapsed, eyes fixed bitterly on her sister, her last breath hissing through clenched teeth. Camilla lifted the diamond with both hands. Its glow wrapped around her, shimmering across her face. She looked both victorious and monstrous in the light, her lips curving into the faintest smile. She had won, but the price of victory was not just blood. The cavern fell into silence after Evelyn's last breath. The shadows that had screamed for blood now melted into the walls, as though satisfied. The flames along the chamber dimmed, leaving only the harsh glow of the diamond in Camilla's hands. For the first time since entering the jungle, Camilla was alone, truly alone. She pressed the diamond to her chest, its cold surface biting into her skin. It felt heavier than stone, as if it carried not just brilliance, but burden. Every step away from the altar echoed across the chamber like judgment. The cave did not let her leave easily. As Camilla walked, the walls trembled. The blue flames flickered, then flared red. The ground split beneath her boots, jagged cracks chasing her heels. The diamond's glow was no longer gentle. It pulsed violently, as if resisting her grip. She gritted her teeth, clutching it tighter. "You're mine. You hear me? Mine." The cave answered with a deep groan, and suddenly the path she had entered through was gone. A stone wall had risen, sealing it shut. In its place, a new tunnel opened, twisting in unnatural directions, as though the cave itself was reshaping to test her resolve. Camilla pushed forward. The tunnel narrowed, forcing her to crouch and squeeze. Stalactites dripped with glowing liquid, each drop hissing as it struck the floor. Shadows crept along the edges, whispering faintly in voices she knew too well, the voices of her sisters. "Camilla," one voice hissed, low and sharp like Evelyn's. "Don't think you've won." Another whispered, carrying Alicia's bitter tone. She froze. Her breath grew shallow. For a moment, it felt like hands brushed against her arms, cold and claw-like. She shook her head violently and pushed forward, refusing to turn back. The whispers grew louder, until the tunnel burst open into a cavern she did not recognize. This chamber was not lit by torches or flames. Instead, the ceiling was jagged and open, letting in beams of sunlight. Camilla stumbled into the light, blinking against its brilliance. For the first time since entering, she felt the kiss of fresh air. But freedom was not immediate. Before her stretched the final gauntlet, a stone bridge spanning a chasm so wide the bottom could not be seen. Wind howled through the gap, tugging at her hair and cloak. The bridge was narrow, cracked, and trembling under its own weight. She knew instantly this was the last test. Taking a deep breath, she stepped onto the bridge. Every footfall sent pebbles tumbling into the abyss. She kept her eyes on the far side, gripping the diamond with both hands. Halfway across, the bridge groaned, splitting in two places. She nearly slipped, arms flailing, the jewel almost tumbling into the void. The voices returned, carried by the wind. "You don't deserve it. You will never leave. You should have died with us." Her knees buckled. For a moment, she nearly believed them. But then something changed. The sunlight cut across her face, warming her, grounding her in the world outside the cave. With a final surge of willpower, she pushed forward, running the last stretch. The bridge cracked completely behind her as her boots hit solid ground. She fell to her knees, gasping, the diamond still clutched to her chest. When she raised her head, the jungle lay before her. Green leaves shimmered in the wind. Birds called faintly in the distance. It was as if the nightmare had ended. But as she stepped into the sunlight fully, the diamond pulsed again, once, twice, then settled. Its glow dimmed, almost as if it were hiding its true nature. Camilla straightened, wiping blood from her face. She was alive. She had won. She had the treasure. Yet her eyes betrayed her victory. They were cold, shadowed. For though she had survived, she carried the weight of betrayal, of sacrifice, of a curse not yet revealed. She did not smile. She only walked, each step heavy with the knowledge that no matter how far she carried the diamond, the cave had marked her. The story would not end here. The jungle whispered it. The diamond knew it. But for now, she was the last sister standing.